Enotria, the last song, released in September 2024, accompanied by some mixed reviews across the board. It is a soulslike, inspired by the games created by From Software, but adds its own traits by creating this title through the lens of Italian folklore. It is a game that I have noticed never really gained any significant traction, but is one I played and had some opinions on, so I thought it was right to at least talk about it. This video will focus on my own experience with the game. I'll address the popular complaints and share my own opinions on the matter as an avid From Software fanboy. Its Metacritic score is honestly not terrible, but when compared to other similar Souls-likes, it seemed to struggle. The main complaint I saw across the internet seemed to be regarding a lackluster boss selection, a janky combat system with a weird, unstable difficulty curve. The general consensus was that this game was just too ambitious for the resources that this studio had available to them. For the most part, I agree with these complaints fully. However, I do feel as if the great parts of this game are overshadowed by the negative aspects. So before we dive into the big faults, let's talk about what was done right. This game is split up into 4 main chapters, kinda 3 because the last area is just the final boss. This seems like a small number, and it is, but each area is very visually distinct and is executed beautifully. From emerging from the tutorial cave to walking up to the final boss, each location is pretty but in very different ways. This game hands you lore in bits and pieces like From Software, and the NPCs scattered throughout each zone really help solidify the Italian folklore in these areas. The visuals in this game were by far my personal favorite part of my playthrough. Another positive is the amount of freedom that this game gives you for your builds. Like most Souls games, there is a way to respec your levels, but additionally you have masks that you can wear. They each give bonuses depending on what you equip and allow you to assign an aspect to your current build. These aspects alter your current stats to better fit what your build is going for. They will often take points from your other stats that are less useful at the time and allocate them into the ones you benefit from most. This makes it so you don't necessarily need to respec if you want to try a different build or weapon. Also, I cannot tell you how great it is to be able to refund upgrade materials. I know you've all had the experience of finding a cool weapon, maxing it out, and then realizing it sucked, or finding a better version 5 minutes later. In Enotria, that is not a problem. At any time, you can get all the upgrade materials you use for a weapon back. This is incredibly helpful as, especially in this game, status effects and weaknesses are an important part of combat, so being able to switch your upgraded weapon to fit your situation is invaluable. This game also has its own twist on the classic talisman and ring buffs. From the start of the game, you're given access to the Path of Innovations. It is a skill tree that grants you buffs in 4 main categories: Trickster, Bruiser, Elementalist, and Battle Mage. These areas are supposed to represent the main builds that can be created, but honestly, by just walking around and picking up all the lore entries, you can mix and match different builds from different paths with no problem. Unlike skill trees in other games, you can only equip a limited amount of these buffs, so only a couple will be active at a time. It is essentially a way for you to increase the potency of your selected playstyle even more. The status effects in this game are also pretty cool and play a vital role in each combat encounter. They follow a weakness route, similar to Pokemon where there are 4 elements that are each strong and weak to one another. These status effects are Vis, Fato, Milano, and Gratia. Vis makes the target dizzy, allowing you to deal more damage. Fato procs the Wicked effect that lets you heal on hit. Gratia procs the Radiant effect that lets you heal over time but triggers an explosion when you get hit. Lastly, Milano is just your basic poison. These are all pretty cool effects and elements that stray away from the classic fire, water, earth trio, forcing you to switch up your used weapon to hit weaknesses and makes each fight feel fresh. Certain element buffs can be better than others though. For example, Fato, that procs Wicked, is by far the strongest. It makes it so any hit you score on the target afflicted with this status will heal you. This is almost necessary due to the way healing works in this game, but I'll talk about that con later in the video. It is also a very threatening element to see on a boss, as when they inflict Wicked on you, they can also heal whenever you get hit. Remind you of anyone? Overall though, I appreciate the creativity with these elements and their effects, as it was one of my favorite options to utilize in my build, where I focused on proccing both Wicked and Vis on each boss to allow me to capitalize on both the increased damage and healing I gain. That wraps up the positive qualities I think should be recognized and praised, but now I want to touch on my not so great experiences I had with this title. To start, let's go over the bosses. For some unknown reason, this game really loves to spam bosses that use way too many projectiles. I get having a ranged fight every once in a while, but when 50% of the roster is less of a Souls-like experience and more of a bullet hell, then that's where I draw the line. Most of these bosses have a very clear area that if you leave it, you trigger their long range attacks, and trust me when I say they spam the living hell out of these. This is particularly irritating when you back away in an attempt to heal, only to trigger this attack phase, forcing you to once again engage. An example of this can be found with the High Priestess of Velta. You walk into the arena and you already know it's going to be a rough fight. In addition to this long range mage boss, you have to fight these other mages that also teleport after every attack. So in between the constant spam between 4 mages at the same time while trying to dodge the massive one-shot AoE of the main boss and try to finish off the teleporting minor ones, it seems to be driving every player to the brink. This is definitely the strongest example, but the overall projectile heavy theme with a lot of the bosses just does not pair well with this game's odd and janky combat system. This system is similar to that of Bloodborne and Lies of P. When locked onto an enemy, you don't have a roll, but instead a quick dash. I find that these are easier to get out of range of an enemy's attack with, but don't have as clear invincibility frames as the classic Dark Souls roll. Both Bloodborne and Lies of P have a rally-like mechanic that allows you to heal back the health you lost and encourage an aggressive playstyle. What is weird with Enotria is you don't have a default rally mechanic and also no block available. You are given a parry instead, which just felt a little odd paired with the quick step. This means if you miss a parry, you will really need to get out of range and heal, but doing that triggers the boss's projectile spam AI and also leads me to my next issue. The healing flasks in this game are pathetic. As long as you explore and fight any bosses you come across, you will definitely find enough, but it's just they heal so little of your overall health that you will almost always need to use 2 to 3, and with the long amount of time it takes to consume it, you will certainly get hit. There is a solution, however, and it's by stacking the Wicked status effect and specific items you can use that will then give you this rally effect that the game so clearly wants you to use. It is just odd to me that if the healing distribution in this title is so obviously telling you to utilize these effects, then why not make it a core part of the gameplay like in Bloodborne? Instead, it forces you to use certain types of weapons and spells in order to proc these effects. Now, by no means do you have to use these effects, and you can definitely still beat the game without them. I just strongly believe that this is what the developers had in mind, as without all these effects stacking, the healing output of your flasks alone is laughable. The rest of the combat system is fitting of your classic Souls-like, where it does work, just nowhere near the same level of polish as the main titles and higher end Souls-likes. The overall boss roster is very fitting of the Italian folklore theme, but like I said earlier, it's just lacking a lot of diversity. Yes, they have some variability, but generally follow the same trends. The AI is quite rough to deal with sometimes and can be flat out exploited by accident or cause you a world of frustration if you happen to cross the magical line putting you down a shooting range. That is not to say there were no enjoyable fights, as I had a good time against a decent number. It's just as a whole, the bosses are certainly a weak aspect of this title. Following the general trend of frustrating combat, the difficulty curve in this game is completely off the rails. It starts off gradual with the first area, all leading up to its main bosses, and all seems well. Then, right after you beat the first area, you unlock a secret area with a boss that spams you with Photo projectiles that heal him and pretty much instantly delete you. It's not a technically impossible fight by any means, it is just a fat vigor check and is scaled ridiculously bad. Now, it's fair, some of you say, but that's a secret area, come back later. Except this is not where the difficulty stops. The entire second main area was much harder, and I found enemies with way too much health and often 1 to 2-shotting me. Pair this with incredibly annoying bosses like this Vis element dude who uses ranged wide slashes to obliterate me. By itself, it's irritating that I die in 1 to 2 hits, but again that's completely manageable and just makes the fight take longer with a bunch of parries. But wait, the developers thought it would be so funny to put a musket dude on the balcony above you, completely out of your reach, but would fire that thing like it's a machine gun and constantly interrupt your attacks and parries. This was genuinely one of the most mind-numbing experiences I have had in gaming, and that says a lot, as Souls games are like 50% of my personality. The difficulty curve continues to be weirdly high throughout all of the second area up to the main boss. Luckily, this boss was actually my favorite one in the game, and was quite the pleasant experience once you get the moveset down, as it is a heavy parry-reliant boss. So after finally beating this area, I moved on to the next, expecting it to continue the unreasonable damage and health pools of the enemies. But no, this area was a cakewalk. Now I 1-2 shot basic enemies, and bosses felt way easier. It was not like their movesets were weaker, and I've utilized elemental weaknesses before, it was just plain easy. I 100% think that switching the third and second areas without touching a thing would have significantly benefited the flow of this game. So I know every con I just went over basically just hates on the only aspects of this game that make it a Souls-like, but that does not mean I'm telling you all not to play it. Yes, it has a story mode that I assume is just not hard and lets you breeze through the game, but I know none of you guys probably clicked on the video for that. Instead, my stance on it is that if you have played Elden Ring and are looking for another Souls experience, I'd say don't pick this title, especially over games throughout the main Souls titles. If you want to take a step away from Software and try something new, I would also first recommend you check out Lies of P, an extremely polished Souls-like. Now, if you have played all of these, or at least seen them and determined they're not for you, I'd say yeah, why not try this game? I definitely got something out of it, and for the PlayStation sale of $35, I'd say it was definitely worth it. The positive elements that I talked about earlier in this video do stand true and are very enjoyable, so if you want something fresh, this definitely fulfills that role. I hope my breakdown of these qualities helped you make a decision about the game, or at least provide you with something interesting to listen to. If you've got any thoughts on this title or questions, feel free to leave them down below and I make sure to check out each one. If you like the content relating to Souls and action games and you like the video, consider sticking around and subscribing as I got a lot planned for this channel. Regardless, thank you all for the support, and until next time.